Hi everyone, welcome back. Thank you for staying. So appreciate it. We're going to lift the spirits now after a bit of a depressing flavour. Thank you so much for staying. My name is Connor Delves. I'm one of the co-artistic directors along with Mark and Jillian. Tonight's industry panel is about Australian artists working and living in New York City. So please welcome Carla, Kissane and the 2024 panelists.
Oh gosh, we sound so live and lovely. Hi everyone, welcome. It's so great to be here. Welcome to the Australian Theatre Festival NYC's 2024 industry panel. I'm Carla Kissane. I use she, her pronouns, and it's my joy, it's my great honour to be your host for this event. And I'm just, I'm thinking as we were sort of huddled backstage, listening to Connor, what a gift it is to be together in time and space. To be in this darkened, huddled mass of humans, to be here at the Festival Hub at Theatre Row to celebrate 5 years of the Australian Theatre Festival NYC. Yes. To honour the contributions of these incredible panellists that I'm about to introduce, and to be in conversation together about Australian artists working in NYC. So sitting across from me is Emilio Ramos, director, creative collaborator, choreographer, Hannah Bailey, actor, singer and poet, and Neil Gooding, producer, writer and director. Very reductive introduction there, but we'll get further in. Very warm welcome to the panel, everyone. It's great to have you here. And before we get truly underway, I have to start by acknowledging the incredible work that we've just experienced. My skin is crawling. I feel profoundly uncomfortable in my body right now. I'm not sure how everyone else is, but I wanted to sort of check in and ask Emilio, how are you doing? What are your initial responses?
I'm overwhelmed. I mean, I sat in the front row right there, so it was all over my face, but I thought it was incredibly timely. It's sort of, it struck me how inextricable, real life is from online life, and I think as people up here who live very global lifestyles, coming from one place and sort of moving all the way over to another place and really relying on the internet to live a full life and to sort of honor where you've come from and to continue to live where you are, it's becoming harder and harder to be offline, to will yourself to sort of step back from the muck of the internet. So that really struck me as I was watching it, yeah.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. And Hannah, we were sitting next to each other, and so I could feel Hannah's body language like mimicking mine, and we were sort of in curls. We were sort of quite twisted, the two of us. How was your experience?
I felt glad to be sitting next to you, actually, like with somebody that I knew, because it was intense and skin crawly for sure, and felt very lost a lot of hope throughout the piece, and then I felt very, very relieved that it sort of, I don't know, that Zoe found her way out of that and came to a place of overcoming that, because I had this dread throughout the play that, oh no, it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse, sort of how I've come to feel in the current sort of systems that we live under. But I was very glad that it actually had that kind of an ending. So
I'm with you. I needed that happy ending.
Yeah.
That it was a happy ending, but I needed that that positivity and the hope for the future. Neil, how was your experience?
I just really admired the writing. I mean, I thought the rhythms of that piece, it was like being on this roller coaster, and at times when it really amped up, I was, you were sitting there going, oh, where's this going? And then I had the thing of going, oh, that's what doxing is, and holy shit, I'm old. I know the term, but I've never seen it in real life, what that actually would look like. It was fascinating, because that's a piece that I just knew nothing about, and at the moment I'm seeing a lot of things I know a fair bit about when I watch it, so it was nice to just go, this is totally new to me. And totally not for someone as old as me. all the cool kids know what the definitions is and how that looks, but not me.
Oh, I think you're a pretty cool kid. And also,
I've never been accused of being a cool kid.
Oh, I don't know about that. I heartily agree with you in terms of the writing, and was talking to Mark earlier, Mark Barford, who directed the piece, that it was 4 days in rehearsal, and 500 cues. Thank you to the tech gods up there for making that possible. It's incredible. If you missed tonight's performance, or if you want to come back for more, there's one more performance tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. of Jamie Hornsby's Python. And I'm curious, this was the runner-up of the 2020 New Play Awards. So you were galvanizing these themes pre-2020, which just feels like the horribly perfect moment for this play. Directed by Mark Barford, starring Alana Allen, Casey Burke, Brenton Cozier, and JD Martin. I do want to just also throw out to the audience right here, because you're here and because we've all just been in this collective experience together. If anyone feels brave to just throw out some words, some emotions, some thoughts, some feelings, a provocation, a question, I believe in you, come on. Like, how do you feel right now? Like, what's a feeling that's coming up?
Bleak but motivated.
Bleak but motivated. That is a wonderful way to encapsulate, I think, what is coming up collectively. Anyone else feeling brave? Come on, I believe in you. We all believe in you.
Angry at the mob of the meta world and the internet and everything else.
Angry at the mob of the meta world and the internet and everything else. Yeah, the anger. I can certainly feel that kind of frisson is in the air right now. So, last but not least, someone else. I know it's there.
Stuck in the generation I'm in, but excited to change it.
Ooh, yes! There's a happy
Yes.
ending. Stuck in the generation I'm in, but excited to change it. And that right there is the transformative power that theatre can offer, right? Is this possibility of something positive coming from an experience that is indefinably bleak, perhaps. All right. Just kind of being in the space with all of you right now, it reminds me of my favorite quote from a theatre director, Polish theatre visionary, Jerzy Grotowski, who said, "It is not the theatre that is indispensable, but something quite different, to cross the frontiers between me and you." And for me, that's why we huddle together in these dark rooms. That's why we make pretend. And it's also why we gather together in conversation afterwards to be a part of this dialogue together and to ask ourselves what it means. What does it mean? So this brings me to the first question for the panel. What does the Australian Theatre Festival mean to you?
Oh God, she's looking at me. It's a chance to really sort of connect to, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but it's a chance to connect to the sort of theatrical voice that excited me when I was growing up, and the theatrical voice of the culture that I come from. I've been in New York almost 13 years, and so to have a chance to connect to this rhythm and this language and the ways that we talk to each other and the ways that our culture sort of reflects back to the world, it's a really important part of the year, because I feel like, especially, I don't know, maybe I'm sentimental, but around the holidays I start to go, oh, it would be nice to be around kin, it would be nice to be around familiarity, and the festival really offers us a chance to have that familiarity and to get to hear these rhythms again and to get to engage with home.
That's so beautiful. I love that you brought up the speech rhythms, because I noticed sort of straight away there's kind of a code that gets adopted, and I always find that I speak softer when I'm speaking with Australians, that like my volume just lowers weirdly. There's all kinds of weird little kind of quirks that I notice that are culturally specific. So I love that you brought that up. Thank you, Emilio.
And how many times have you heard the word chippies on a Broadway?
Right, chippies, exactly. Neil, what is it for you?
I've seen most of the festivals, and what I think more than, I mean, apart from the fact I get to see new playwrights, because I was very heavily involved in programs to develop new works in Australia, and I've been over here for 5 years, and it only takes 5 years before I go, whoa, I don't know. There was a point when I knew everybody writing everything, and now I don't even know half the cast of Grease in Australia, because they get younger and I get older. But what I think the festival has done for me is there's a whole network of Australians that are not necessarily here to work, and a lot of them actually aren't here to work in theatre. But it does bring together all the people here for finance and American Josh and all these sort of people. And so it is this really sort of galvanising moment for all the people who are crazy enough to go, I'm going to leave Australia and get my green card or get my visa and go and live here with this beautiful weather we've had today.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's just a nice focal point for me with that whole Australian community that sort of does come and support this. And you know, I think Mark and Jillian and Con have just busted their valves for 5 years to create something out of nothing. Exactly. And someone like me gets the benefit of like being an honoree last year and just catching up with other great Aussies, you know, without actually having to do any work. So it's been amazing to sort of just be this satellite around all of their hard work and what they've created.
Well, cheers to that, and let's give them a hand now. It's acknowledgement right there, and you couldn't have said it better than a focal point. So beautifully expressed that we are kind of satellite around. Hannah, what is it for you?
God, it's so much. Like, that's such a nice question to be asked, because I've been involved with the festival for a little while, and I feel like so much that I've done, so many of the projects I've done since the festival started 5 years ago have kind of come out of the festival, whether it's like directly stuff happening every year, or, you know, people that I've met through the festival creating other Aussie works, or not Aussie works that now I just know people through. So that's been like a really amazing part of it. And yeah, also just the community that's been developed over the last couple of years. Like, there used to not be an Australian community, and like now there is one. And every year I like come to these spaces and like speak in my accent and like forget that we're in New York, and then I walk back out onto 42nd Street and I'm like, oh my god, right, we're in New York. It's so special, and I think it's incredible what they've done, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. So
Yeah, I can certainly relate, and that experience of coming back every year, and the community that just sort of grows and grows and grows, and all the weird and wonderful little spiderweb connections that I, you know, used to be, I sort of looked forward to the festival all year, and now I sort of feel like I more and more see people throughout the year, and so there's more and more of a sense of it's an ongoing experience. So wow, we're so lucky to have this. I'm going to pivot now to our first kind of broad open question. Our theme is, of course, Australian artists working in New York City. So I have to ask the question, why New York? Why New York? I will pop out a Delia Ephron quote for you, who says that New Yorkers are born all over the country, and then they come to New York City and they realize, oh, that's who I am. There's also the E.B. White, who says, no one should come to New York City to live unless he is willing to be lucky. So what was it? Why New York? What brought you here, Emilio? Want to kick us off?
Oh, killing with the quotes, I think that Delia Ephron quote is exactly right. I just it haunted my dreams, and I was just so obsessed with Broadway musicals as a kid. It was everything to me, and I'm a bit of a shithead in that I was born here, and so I have dual citizenship, and so it was not as much of a slog to be here and to stay here. It sort of was, you know, it was a path that was very readily available for me to come and live here, but I did it very young, and I've stayed for a very long time, and I'm proud of the perseverance, because I like that other quote. It's like, you have to believe that you are lucky, and believe that, you know, you have a place here, and I feel very, very lucky, and I feel very fortunate that there was a place here for me, and I was in the right place at the right time, and this has certainly become my home.
I feel like New York is also very lucky to have you, so let's just snap that right back. Hannah, what was it for you? Why New York?
Well, you were talking about luck in the quote. It was sort of just a series of weird, lucky coincidences that like led me here. I was just here with my family, and I kind of ran into a friend that was at the school that I ended up auditioning for, that I ended up getting into. Like, it just kind of happened when I was 20, and then I've had to like really consider that question every couple of years, when like with another visa cycle every time that I have to go through all of that. And it just I don't know, like my life is here, and all the connections we're talking about, the Australian community, plus like so much else that is also here. Like it's all like my entire adulthood, it really feels like, has been here. And it is an incredibly special place, and it keeps sort of just offering more reasons to stay, I think. And it's been fun to just kind of let it take me, I guess.
Yeah, New York certainly has that kind of overwhelming force that you sort of get on, or you sort of sink or swim, don't you? But it
Right.
seems very much like you've been able to ride the wave. So congrats on that. That is not an easy wave. Neil, what is it for you?
So I had quite a late introduction to New York. I hadn't been here till I was, when I was 33, I had produced a show in Australia called The Hat Pin, and we brought that over to NYMF, which was the music theatre festival that was running at the time. And so I had this unfair introduction into New York, where like James Miller and Peter Rutherford and Caroline O'Connor and I were sort of walking around, and Caroline had been here a lot, but the other three of us were like, we might just live here, and I sort of, it does sort of seep into your skin. So it's weird, because I went home after that, and there was just a lot of dreams in New York, and a lot of walking around the streets, and it only took a divorce and a change of circumstances to come back over, but it was, for me, I had spent a lot of years developing new Australian musicals, both through a thing called New Musicals Australia, and then the Hayes Theatre Company when we set that up, and there was this very specific moment for me where I was walking down 45th Street, and apart from the fact that it's an amazing block where those theatres just joined, it was in 5 theatres. It was Bandstand had just opened, over the road was Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet, the next corner was Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen, and I just went, these are the kind of shows that I like and that I work on are suddenly these commercial properties. Or in the case of Come From Away, where I saw the 3rd preview of that ever, you go, oh my god, I think that's about to become Come From Away. That was in the phase where people couldn't remember the title. They thought it was like called Come Fly With Me, Fly Away With Me. Everyone was going, hey, you're going to do a September 11 musical. And I saw that and Dear Evan Hansen go from this unknown show to 2 weeks later being, that's Come From Away. And I just went, that can't really happen in Australia in the same way with new musicals. And then, everything changes. So sadly, now I've lived here I took years to come back over full time, but I've lived 5 years. And then you sort of see under the hood.
Yes.
And you go, actually, we're doing a lot of things right in Australia.
Yes.
And right now, there's a lot of things not going right on Broadway, and particularly in the development of new musicals. And,
Yeah, sure.
while Equity's fighting with the Off-Broadway League, you can't tour an Off-Broadway show. And while Equity's fighting with everybody else, you can't actually do a workshop of a show.
Right.
And so, it's one of those interesting things where I now go, I live in New York and I'm in love here, and all of my work will not be in New York at this point. It's all over the rest of the world. But there is still something, I think the cycle will come back around. Like, you can't have this collection of geniuses that all come to one city and not have exciting things happening.
Well, sure, and also what I'm hearing from you is that there's a symbiotic relationship, right, that gets established where it's like there's a New York is of the moment in some ways, and so there's a moment that can happen here, and there's the establishment of relationships here, and then there's really exciting, important work that is happening in Australia that can happen here, with festivals like this, with work like Jamie's gets to be put on a global stage, when producers of your stature get to kind of travel back and forth and kind of provide that human bridge. So I think the bridge is important, and I thank you for being that bridge, because we need that too. I'm gonna kick off with our second question, which is, we are talking about Australian artists working in New York City, and I would love, and I think our audience also would love, to hear some highlights and some lowlights, highs and lows of your time, so challenges, surprises, funny stories. I'll kick you off with a really silly one, which is I just remember my first rehearsal room in New York City, and I was kind of really scared and I wonder what it's going to be like. Will I be able to speak words? Will I remember how to be an actor? Is it different over here? All of those things. And we've been rehearsing about an hour, and the director says, okay, let's take a break, and everything's sort of fine so far. And the stage manager says, okay, everyone, we're going to take 10 minutes. And then everyone dropped what they were doing, and like a little Greek chorus, they said, thank you, 10. And I was like, what is this? Thank you, 10, echoing back kind of call and response moment. It was very foreign to me and delightful, and just a funny little New Yorkism that is, of course, throughout the US. And now, of course, I use in every rehearsal room ever. But there's fun little things like that you don't realize when you're rehearsing in a different country. So, highs and lows. I've given you a little moment to think. Jump in, whoever feels ready.
Oh, I've got several. The highs, for me, a lot of them are tied to those very early experiences. Like, I remember Peter Rutherford, who composed The Hat Pin, and I walking from the east side across, and it was just getting dark. And that first moment where I looked and went, oh, that's Times Square. It was suddenly just there. And like my girlfriend who is in New York, she hates Times Square, and I still walk through it going, it's Times Square. It's amazing. And then there's just all those rooms, and you know, on that trip too, like we were all much younger, and it was just exciting. Like, you know, I saw the second last show of Rent, the last public show of Rent, and it was a huge storm that hit. It was just one of the things, and I sat behind Rosario Dawes, so I was going, this is the best thing ever. Like, it was the right show at the right time. And then the other ones are, you know, it's hard to describe. There's just things that happen that constantly remind you of going, oh, I'm in New York. And for me, like, I don't get that starstruck by actors. I do by the Socceroos, and what I do nerdily here is I go, I do get starstruck by Alex Timbers and Michael Arden and all these producers. And so there was a night at Sardi's not long ago where, Bob Wankel, who's the head of the Schubert organisation, that's the kind of person I get excited over for some reason. And he was in the corner of the table, so I found myself going, whoa, he's talking to some guy. And then that guy got up, went to the bar and went, oh, that's Andrew Lloyd Webber. and like 13-year-old me just went, what? I'm in New York, that's right. So it's those moments that, like even the opening of Swept Away the other night, at the party, I went, God, that looks like Amanda Seyfried. I went, yeah, that's Amanda Seyfried. It's just those things you go, that doesn't happen that often in Sydney.
Right. I'm curious if there's a low, like, hiding in there. I know, but there's got to be like a fun. There's got to be like a fun, like, fail moment.
Well, I'm just jumping quickly for my low. I mean, it's when you watch something get built like Harmony earlier in the year, and you see the absolute blood, sweat, and tears that go into that, and everybody's there, you know, and you know the frailties of the show. You go, we know that Barry Manilow needs to write a new ending of Act 1, and he just can't do it, or we need to cut that. But then, when that show just doesn't work commercially and close, I mean, it is, and it's brutal here. As Tammy Faye has found out this week, it's like, you know, the way the reviews come out on your opening night party and the way that bloggers work. Like, you can do stuff in Sydney and you've got, you know, Cassie Tung may hate it, give it a bad review, or something, but or John Shand might think it's over amplified in these reviewers we have down there, but it's not as exposing as it is here. It's an absolute love fest for things they love, and an absolute pile on for things that the theatre set don't like, and
very direct, isn't it?
That makes highs and lows much more obvious.
No beating around the bush, no lukewarm experience. And I think that's kind of a hallmark of life in New York. It's kind of highs and lows, isn't it? Anything emerging for the two of you?
Highs, lows, both. A very like New York specific high that I've had fairly recently was this like funny show that I did called The Fish Queen of the Gowanus Canal, which we performed like on site on the Gowanus Canal. It was about like, I don't know if you know the waterway, it's like one of the most toxic waterways in the country, and the show was like about how toxic it was. And then we were like on these floating barges like performing it to audience that were in canoes. Like, it was just the most Brooklyn thing you can ever imagine. And the whole time I was just like having the feeling that like this wouldn't happen on the Yarra River, like this just couldn't happen in Melbourne. Like, it's just so this sort of like bootstrappiness of like my American friends that just like put this on, of like they wrote this show in their living room and they got their friends and they put them on a barge with these like canoe guys that were like rowing us out to stage. Like, it was ridiculous and fun, and I was feeling very grateful for that. And then I guess when thinking of lows, like my mind just goes to the pandemic. Like, I was here throughout the pandemic, and not so much like I was very fortunate, like I was safe and I was well, but just sort of my relationship to my work throughout that time was difficult. Like, there was nowhere to act. I was a year out of acting school, so was sort of still trying to find who I was in relation to that, and like had all this creative space and just didn't really know what to do with myself for a while, and that was tough. And I think I'm still like trying to find the cruising altitude of like how all of that fits together, having come out of that in the last few years. So.
Wow!
Yeah.
Wow! I've got this vision of you as the fish queen, just cruising along the Gowanus Canal. I feel like you've got this locked in. You've got this sorted.
Maybe fish queen is the way forward.
Yeah. Emilio, what about you? Highs and lows?
I mean, Hannah and I were kind of talking about this before the show, but definitely the pandemic was just such a on a lot of levels. It was a huge shake-up. Obviously, artistically, it sort of all put us in a silo, and it was really just sort of a waiting game about when we could do something live and in person together again. And especially, I think, also because I was like Hannah and I didn't return to Australia during sort of the peak of the pandemic. I didn't go back there until 2022. And it was a constant reminder just of how far away this is, like from Australia, especially from Victoria, from Melbourne, and this is sort of the furthest away you can be, and to be away for that long and to have that sort of distance amplified by the fact that we were all going through it, it was really, really, really tough, and I found it artistically stunting as well. It was like wanting to feel like we could do something alone in our rooms, but really what we do is live and in person and with each other, and so it was incredibly difficult. But we got through it, and we're all here, and we're all, safe and as healthy as we can be. I'm gonna say that my high was I was incredibly fortunate to make my Broadway debut when I was very, very young. I'd only been a couple years in New York, just sort of by circumstance was really great. And I have a very fond memory of finishing my first show at Lincoln Center, sort of feeling the depletion of like, oh, I've achieved this goal I've had ever since I was a young child, like sort of what now? And I don't know what happened, but just sort of like the brain chemistry sort of went, no, this is what happens now. Like it's not the achieving of the goal, it's that you like get to work. It's that you get to continue to do the thing, and that's actually what's so amazing about theater is it's not like you put something in the can that goes to an editing day and then you see it 2 years later. It's you get to come back the next day, and then the day after that you might get to do it twice in one day, and then the lesson that, especially in New York and especially in terms of commercial theater, like Broadway feels like this really epic prize to claim at the top of a mountain that you've scaled, and actually like getting to a Broadway show is just getting to the base of a very fancy mountain, and the scaling of it is actually the joy. So I feel like it was a good lesson to learn young, and it was the kind of lesson I think that you can only really learn in this environment, in this city. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. I'm going to get into the panel here a little bit more specific. So Hannah, we'll start with you, if that's okay. She, hers, right? You're an Australian Filipino actor, singer and poet. And I love that your credits open with the on-site performance at Gowanus Canal, the Fish Queen. We've already gone there, so I won't continue along that track. You're also an alumni of the Australian Theatre Festival NYC, performing in Single Asian Female and also at the ATF Cabarets. Your first collection of poetry, Drawing Blood or On My Mother's Toes, was published in 2021. Congratulations. And we can also listen to all your original music on all the streaming platforms. So Hannah, it's interesting, we were talking earlier that we have similar backgrounds, both lived for bits and pieces in Perth and Melbourne, trained at the National Theatre Drama School and the VCA, like there's a lot of synergy here. And then you came to NYC and you trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and were granted a place into the Academy Company. And because you're a published poet, I have to ask you about language. So given that we're at the Australian Theatre Festival experiencing new writing by Aussie playwrights, what do you think of the actor's relationship with the playwright? Like, how does the actor's relationship with the playwright work for you? How do you approach a text? And how do you think your work as an actor has informed your poetry and your songwriting?
Totally. I think they are inextricable. Like, I think I am a poet because I'm an actor, and I think I'm an actor because I've always had a love for writing. And like an acting class I took a really long time ago when I was a teenager, the teacher would just hop on and on about how like you have to love the writing, and I think that's like moved in on me slowly throughout my career and throughout the projects I've been doing. I was just taking an acting class, a scene studies class, over the last few weeks, and I was working on The Glass Menagerie, and that's like some of the most incredible playwriting that there is, and it was just so refreshing to read something so like dense, and like he just gives you everything that you need, and like you can never like investigate what he's telling you through the text enough. And it was just really nice because I feel like I spend so much time like reading self-tape sides for commercials and like that, like there's not that much to love in like that kind of text. And so it's really refreshed my love and engagement with writing, and I've spent a lot of time at Drama Bookshop the last few weeks just sort of trying to absorb what is in there at the moment, and did that answer your question?
Yeah, beautiful. You know, and I'm also thinking, just looking at Jamie sitting there, sorry Jamie, but you caught my eye, and I was thinking how lucky we are in this kind of an environment that we actually get to have the playwright sometimes in the room or in the orbit of the world, and you can actually ask them directly, and just what a gift it is to be in that conversation with a full creative team, and so how exquisite that we get to have those kinds of opportunities through this festival. Thank you so much. Let's go with Neil. Neil, I'm going to do a terribly reductive version of everyone's bio because we're low on time. Neil Gooding, he, him, is an international producer, director and writer. I'm going to share some highlights of your very prolific career here. So you're currently one of the producers on Back to the Future on the West End, Broadway, and on the US tour. Back in 2009, I love that you produced the Australian premiere of Gutenberg, the musical, for which you were nominated for a Helpman Award and a Green Room Award for your direction. And my personal favourite from your bio is the founding chairman of the Hayes Theatre Company in Sydney, in honour of Nancy Hayes, who incredible consummate performer. And I'm truly astounded at the prolific creativity that is just emanating from everything that you've offered to the community, from you're such a leader in the arts industry, and looking at the sort of choice of works, it's interesting that you mentioned the hat pin, because I auditioned for a production years ago and so bought the CD, and I think it was the first time that I was listening to a piece of musical theatre, which is my favourite thing to do, is like lie in bed and listen to musical theatre, and hearing Australian accents. And so it begs the question, for an Australian producer with international credits and all these connections, when do you think we're going to see a truly Australian musical on Broadway that isn't a jukebox, that isn't a film adaptation, that isn't a biopiece? What's in the works? How do we create one? What's cooking?
Well, I mean, I'm absolutely intrigued at the moment about the reviews for My Brilliant Career at NYC. I heard some of the early demos of that show, and the reviews. I've got my scouts going down now, so I'll be able to know a bit more accurately, because sometimes the reviews, when you are not in Australia, you do look back and go, wow, it's swung around. Like, Sydney's overly positive about things at the moment and Melbourne's not, and so depending on who's reviewing, depends on whether you can actually rely on those reviews or not, I find.
Sure.
But look, I always think, because when we had the Hayes, we ran New Musicals Australia, and we were looking through hundreds of them. And everybody's always talking about the great Australian musical, and it used to annoy me, because I was like, well, there's no great American singular musical, and there's no great singular. So until we have a body of work that you go, these are great Australian musicals, and suddenly we're recognised globally because of these pieces.
Sure.
So that sort of shows how far behind we were. Still, people still talk about the reviews for My Brilliant Career are still saying, could this be the great Australian musical here? Well, there's no such thing.
Yeah, what's that platitude? Yeah.
But I think our writers down there at the moment are really, probably for the first time ever, because when we did the hat pin, James and Pete, they went to WAPA, and WAPA was the hotbed at that time for Dean Bryan and Matty Frank and Matthew Robinson and all the people of that generation that were writing musicals, and really they just got cast albums, and they got lots of CDs, and that was sort of at that point how Australian writers were able to keep some sort of finger on the pulse of what was being written internationally.
Sure.
The big shift now that's really happened is that, I mean, James and Pete really had no mentors, because Max Lambert could certainly give some leadership, but we had lost Nick Enright by that stage. We had lost oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on his name, but the director that had done a lot of new musicals had died, whose name will pop up very soon for me, and Ross Coleman as a choreographer had died, and so when we tried at the Hayes to start some sort of mentoring programs, we realised that there was this generation that were writing good works, but they didn't have mentors above them. The difference now, if you're 18, 19, 20, 21 in Australia, is Tim Minchin exists in the world, and Eddie Perfect exists, and James and Pete have written their stuff, and right now you've got Laura Murphy and Eve Blake and Brittany Shipway and all these great female, Carmel Dean sort of is hooking back into the Australian network, and Anna Jacobs is hooking back in. So there is suddenly this really exciting web of super talented writers who also, the difference is they have access to YouTube. And so suddenly now you can keep a finger on the pulse of, because it used to happen all the time when people were submitting, particularly older dudes, but they would come to me and say, I've got the next Les Mis. And I'd be like, shit, this is 2018. And like Les Mis was written in 1985, so that would be like turning up with a Walkman and going, look at this amazing technology. And so that was, you know, that's the difference with Eve and the difference with Laura is that, I mean, Laura, the lovers that she wrote, Laura sent me her first demos about 10 years ago, and I spent 9 years trying to kick her butt to get her to finish the thing.
Right.
My view of her music is that she was writing Six before Six existed.
Right.
And sort of it had missed, with the lovers, has missed that wave, because now that Six is global, everybody's now grabbing their Shakespeare pieces and putting pop music to it. But, you know, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening down there. And I think what will happen with more funding and more support and more theatre companies that actually put on these works, there's going to be a body of work that comes out.
I mean,
you
it
go,
seems
they're our Australian musicals. Forget the one musical.
Right. And from what you're saying, I'm also hearing that it's the community that's important, it's the mentorship that's important, it's the structure, it's the support for development that's important, it's the wholeness of it. It's not a one, you know, there's no lone genius out there in the woods, you know, waiting to write the great Australian musical.
And it was also convincing the Australian government that, like Chris Stewart and I put in a lot of hours talking to governments, because they weren't funding musicals.
Right.
I could stand up naked and dance with a feather, and I would get some sort of funding from one of the government boards. But the music board wasn't doing musicals, the theatre board wasn't doing musicals, the multi-arts one wasn't. And so the battle we won was to go, can somebody please support the writing of new musicals?
Right.
And the music board put their hand up, but then it opened up conversations about like what is an Australian musical? Because for a long time, like James and Pete and I were the happy ones. Like James Miller used to call it the Bucket and Wells musicals, which was like everyone going, I'm going to the pub, and I go, then you go, well, that's never been global musical theatre. That's like kind of weird Australian vaudeville music. And you know, we had a lot of battles with shows like Miracle City when we brought it back to Hayes of people questioning what an Australian musical was, because they wanted it to be like set in the outback and here's the diggers coming home from the war.
Right.
And I think we succeeded in broadening that definition, at least at the government level, to say, are we going to say that Matilda is not an Australian musical because it's set in London? Because you go, the composer and lyricist is Australian. And so the new definition kind of is, if there's an Australian creative writer on it, then that at least falls into the bucket of Australian musicals.
Well, hallelujah for that. Emilio, I'd love to pivot to you next. Emilio Ramos, he is a theatre director and creative collaborator based in New York City. Recently, he directed the off-Broadway revival of See What I Want to See at Theatre 154. That was me listening to Audra McDonald in my backyard in Perth to See What I Want to See. Currently, they are the associate director of Maybe Happy Ending on Broadway, as well as the upcoming US tour of Parade. Emilio, Maybe Happy Ending is having a moment on Broadway right now. I'm going to quote the New York Times from last week here. They called it a joyful, heartbreaking, cutting-edge production. It's a New York Times critics pick. We know how hard that is to do in this town. And the journey of the show, as I understand it, was first written in English, then translated into the Korean language, then it premiered in Seoul, then it came back for its US premiere at the Atlanta Alliance Theatre, and now it's a Broadway sensation with an all Asian American cast, and you are at the helm as an associate director. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So how's the journey of the show been for you as an associate director? And what is an associate director for our friends in the audience?
An associate director is somebody who, you know, directors are amazing, wonderful, talented geniuses, but they can't do it all on their own. Somebody's got to make sure they're watered and fed. And so we are sort of at the side of the director, making sure that the vision stays intact and that all the pieces are lining up in the way that you want. Something like Maybe Happy Ending. We had 2 people on Michael's team just because like the tech of it is really, really complicated, and it's a brand new musical, and so you want to make sure that the themes and the story are really clear. So there were a lot of eyes on it, but as the associate, I'm also in charge of coming in and maintaining the show and making sure that still fits its rhythm, and making sure the understudies are ready to go, which is part of my joy. As when I used to perform, I was a swing and an understudy on a lot of things, and so it's really a joy to be able to sort of give that sort of preparation back, and to give actors like a safe place to be off stage and to prepare to go on at a moment's notice.
So basically everything.
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
it's
everything.
You know, I was a performer, and I had a very sudden sort of switch into directing at the hands of Speak of Mentorship. My mentor, the great director Michael Arden, who I work on Parade and Maybe Happy Ending and a couple other things, and Maybe Happy Ending was my first opportunity to sit at the table with Michael and to really understand what a director does, and I wouldn't have had this sort of watershed revelation about what I think my calling really is in the theatre, which is to be a director, had I not been given the opportunity by someone like Michael, who saw me, you know, doing weird regional theatre and you know, on a project of his, and sort of, you know, scoped me out and said, this is a brain that deserves to, you know, work a little harder. So I'm very, very grateful for that relationship and for that turn, and it really could have, again, it's something that only could have happened in New York and around these properties. So I'm extremely fortunate, and I love my job, and I love Maybe Happy Ending. Please come see it. If you
Yes,
haven't.
everyone come and see it. I'm also really hearing from all of this that it's the quality of the relationship, right? It's the quality of the relationship, it's the mentorship, it's the dialogue, it's the give and take, it's the back and forth, and it's that over many, many years that makes a community, and how fortunate we are to have this. I am going to pivot to our last question before we open up to the audience. So this is a kind of one wish question, and I'm going to phrase it by way of a joke that I stole from Onstage blog. So there are two actors and a stage manager rehearsing in a room, and they find a little bottle in the corner and they rub it, and a genie pops out, and the genie says, "What's your one wish?" And the actor goes, first, me first, and they say, you know, I'd love $1 million and 10 lovers, and I want a penthouse suite. Poof, the actor's gone. And the second actor's like, if they get $1 million, I'll take $10 million and 20 lovers, and I'll be on a desert island. Poof, the second actor's gone. And the stage manager says, I'd like them both back here in 10 minutes. So,
Thank you, Jen.
thank you, Ted. I just got told 2 minutes left, so I really got to wrap this up. So you've got 2 minutes. And I would love to hear, what's your one wish for the global theatre community? What's that one piece of medicine that you would give in the form of theatre right now?
Subsidy. Support, and I wish that culturally the theatre was sort of looked at as a much more powerful tool for social engagement, for social justice, for political engagement. I think it is probably the most vital art form we have, in terms that it takes human bodies and breath out there, and sort of this communion. It is literally being stuck in a place where you have to hear each other out, and I think that is sorely lacking in our world. So support for good theatre and theatre that creates conversation would be my wish.
Oh my goodness. Yes to that. Hannah?
Yes, theatre that creates conversation, and just maintaining its love of itself, because I feel like there is so much that's out there that is, I just feel like it, like, really for like making money and like the capitalism that's sort of really, you know, seeped into what we do. But I hope that we're able to maintain our grip on why we love it and what we do it for, and all of that. Yeah.
Beautiful. In very simple terms, money and love. Neil?
I think mine would be that the economics of theatre here were more flexible and allowed sort of the creativity and the artistry that I see happening in London at the moment. But really, probably my bigger wish is that we could take the best of New York and the best of London and transplant it to Australia and live there with that climate and do what we do down there. Like, that would be the ideal.
Amazing. I think we maybe have time for one audience question. Is there a burning audience question out there? We primed you earlier. Come on, who's got it? Who's got that one burning question?
How do you remember all your lines?
Classic talkback question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious if there's, and you kind of were touching upon this a little bit, if
if there's a concept or an idea or like a feeling from Australian culture that you feel like could benefit American culture and American theater, and just something about the way that Australians think that you feel like could be beneficial to the conversations that we're having here.
I'll just repeat that for the recording. So, and hopefully I get this right. Is there one concept, feeling, way of behaviour, cultural idiosyncrasy about what is Australian that the American culture perhaps might benefit from?
Yeah, I've got a really clear answer to that one. In the rehearsal rooms here, I wish that Americans would have the directness and openness that Australians have in creative discussions. So in a rehearsal room in Australia or a development, they are safe spaces, but people that have opinions will put those opinions on the table, and if it's well moderated by a director or a producer, they'll say, best idea wins, throw the ideas out there, and people are not scared to say, this is what I think, and if it doesn't fit, they just go, we hear you, but that's not really where we're going with it. In American rooms, I see way too much of really, really smart people that have many opinions that will say up front, they're scared to put their opinion, and then they go, look, I'm not saying this is right, but we could, and they disown it before they put it on the table, and there's just it's overly polite. When I know in their heads, I go, that actor knows that this piece of writing is rubbish, and that's not going to work. And Australia's not as brutal as just saying that's terrible, but those robust conversations, I find are missing from the rooms here, and they would fast track a lot of things that take way too long because everybody is scared to own their own opinion.
I see Emilio nodding.
Yeah, I also think that there's sort of a safety, like Neil was saying, it's sort of a safety in the support that a lot of rooms, I would say, over there get, whereas it's, especially in New York and especially in the commercial sphere, it's so driven by a certain amount of dollars, and I find that really quells the artistic process, and it really quells a lot of the honesty that could happen. So I would agree with Neil on as my answer to this question. It's like I believe there's sort of a light directness. You know, it's a very jovial culture. It's, you know, very larrikin based, but there is sort of a directness that cuts through that is I would say is definitely missing, that sort of comes to us naturally. I don't know what it is.
Anything to add, Carla?
Oh, I was gonna say mandatory voting, but then you guys talked about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Mandatory voting?
Mandatory voting, no, but she's so right.
I feel like that's...
That one, yeah.
Well,
And universal healthcare.
And universal healthcare. Look, this has been an incredible evening. I feel like I do have to wrap it up because I'm way past my 2 minutes here. Thank you so much for being here. I'll just wrap up with a few quick thoughts about the festival. We've got in 2024 the Australian Theatre Festival NYC is presenting, as you know, 2 plays, a cabaret, an industry panel here, and a community party. Performed and presented across the 5 days from November 20th to 24th, taking place here at our festival hub on 42nd Street at Theatre Row and Green Room 42. Tickets are still available at the australiantheatrefestival.com/season 2024. And I'd like to extend a really special invitation to our main stage production of Cole by Jacinta Yelland and Trey Lyford. And this is a family-friendly production for ages 8 and up. So it's taking place on Saturday and Sunday, the 23rd and 24th, here at Theatre Row at 3 p.m. If you come on Saturday, you can follow this up by coming to the cabaret at 7 p.m. just around the corner at Green Room 42, and you can stay for the community party afterwards. So please book your tickets if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for Jamie Hornsby's Python. Let's give a round of applause for the cast and crew for that incredible work of Python. Yes. To our fearless festival directors, Mark Barford, Jillian Geurts, and Connor Dells for 5 incredible years at the Australian Theatre Festival NYC. Thank you so much. And to the Oz Theatre Fest's industry panel, let's give a hearty Aussie thank you to these 3 incredible panelists, Neil Gooding, Hannah Bailey, and Emilio Ramos. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us tonight. Thank you for having me as your host. Thank you for leaving your apartments this evening, putting on your clothes, and coming out to see and support live theatre. It's been wonderful being here with you. Please keep up that good audience work, and we'll all see you, hopefully, later this week for Cole, Community, and Cabaret. Woo!